please welcome Murray Altham.
Thank you. It's great to be here. So how many people have heard of a zettabyte? Okay, so one zettabyte equals a trillion gigabytes or a billion terabytes. And in 2016, this will be the first time in the history of the world where a zettabyte of data has traveled on the internet. And do you know what's extraordinary about that is in 4 years' time, they predict that number will be 2.3 zettabytes. So what they've done in our lifetime up to here on the internet in the next 4 years is going to over double that'll come through. So what that means to all of us is change is coming, change is fast. We've got to be very nimble, and it may demand more of us for our communication. In 2020, there'll be 3 times the global population of devices connected to the internet. So that's over 26 billion devices. And it would take you 5 million years to watch 1 month's video data that's been uploaded onto the net. So that puts binge watching Game of Thrones into perspective, doesn't it? Don't feel so bad now. So what do we do with that? Business is going to move fast. It's going to demand more of our ability to communicate, and maybe we need to be nimble and change. So why are soft skills or micro skills important, and are they growing? Let's have a look at from the World Economic Forum and have a look at the skill sets in 2015 versus the skill sets that are going to be expected in 2020. First of all, you can see creativity has shot up the charts from number 10 to number 3. You can see that quality control and active listening have been voted off the island. And what's come into that skill set is emotional intelligence and cognitive flexibility. So what is interesting, even though the internet and the technology and artificial intelligence and 3D printing is all growing, isn't it interesting that 3 things that are on that list are soft skills or warm skills? So why do you need to be more creative? So in Australia at the moment, there's 16 new solo businesses registering every day. Because as we move into the gig economy, where it's kind of going to look like ride sharing for jobs, where people are going to be working independently and maybe working with multiple companies at the same time. So even though they may feel like an employee, they're really an entrepreneur. And so they're going to have to be more creative in putting that together. So how many of you are in business? Okay, now how many of you consider yourselves artistic? Isn't it amazing? It's never the same number. And if you think about being an entrepreneur, it's the most creative thing you can do. You literally start with a blank sheet of paper, normally a bit of stress and a nice relationship with your bank manager, and you've actually got to create something out of nothing. Isn't that amazing? And so as individuals, we're going to be doing that as well. Emotional intelligence is really important because, you know, there's a whole era of people that have become experts at online communication skills. And what's highly valued now is offline communication skills. How many of you are married? How many of you proposed by text or over the phone? None? Well done, by the way. Good work. So all the big conversations you have in your life, the big events, the closing of the big deals, the working with partners, the connecting with people that can drive your projects forward, they're all going to really happen face to face. And so having offline communication skills where you can do communication and negotiation and conflict resolution, that's a skill set which is now becoming more and more valuable. And the other thing is cognitive flexibility, which is a really nice way, I think, of just saying you need to have an open mind. So my parents are in their 80s, and every time a new technology comes through, it's like this huge change management progress. We managed them at 81 to get them onto Facebook, and that took us probably 6 months. I mean, I've read books about negotiating with terrorists, but there's no books on negotiating with 80-year-olds, let me tell you. They're amazing. So cognitive flexibility and having an open mind, we've just got to be very open-minded about the future because change is coming fast. So if we want to develop these skills, like where do we find them? Where do we find these exotic and mysterious people skills and communication skills that are so important? And I think it's always good to go to Maria and the Sound of Music, the great philosopher, and we start at the very beginning because that's a very good place to start. So Warren Buffett, you've often seen him interviewed, and The obvious question to ask him is, what's your best investment been? And so I was reading about him, and when he was 14, he wasn't doing very well at school because he wasn't getting along with anybody. I know you find that hard to believe, but he just wasn't sort of connecting with anybody. And he found a book written in 1936, and he now says that that was his best investment. And that book was called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And you think, how can it be possible to have a solution in this high-tech era with something that was written in 1936? And it's interesting to look at. Now, I remember buying this book. It was in the 80s in Sydney. Anybody my era? You beautiful young things won't know this. But the personal development section used to be at the back of the newsagent. You had to go past Penthouse, past Playboy, past everything else to get to the personal development section, and there were 4 books, and this was one of them. And then you had to put it in a brown paper bag, because can you imagine sitting on a tram reading that? And everybody's going, oh, poor love, hasn't got any friends. What should we do? Can we help him? So now professional development is expected because companies used to drive that, where now there's an expectation that you are developing, professionally developing and personally developing yourself. So you hear all this talk about innovation and disruption. Well, how's that possible if we don't innovate and disrupt ourselves? And communication is a very safe place to start that because you get a lot of bang for your buck. So let's have a little look at a couple of principles. Don't criticise, condemn or complain. Oh, revelation, right? Unbelievable. And if you look at the internet and the interwebs, it's really just a tidal wave of that, isn't it, a lot of the time? So as business owners and business leaders, we need to set up a very clear counter-narrative. And if you've got staff and a team, you want them to have a counter-narrative as well, because this sort of chips away. So have a think about what the opposite of criticism is, the opposite of condemning, and the opposite of complain. So it could be encourage, that would be good. Validating is good for opposite of condemnation, validating or recognition. And complaining, change that to complimenting. And decide that that's something that you want to do. These principles are really interesting to invest in if you have team meetings or development meetings, because you need to build a strong foundation. So as you are required to communicate more clearly and faster with international markets or what's going on around you, a good foundation is really helpful. Praise others' achievements. How many here just hate getting compliments? I mean, it's like recognition is something babies will cry for and men will die for. Like, we love it. Somebody tells me like good, especially once you hit over 50, you think, oh, yes, I love you, thank you. So it's important to praise people for what they do well. So if you've got a checkout operator that checks your eggs when they're in the box before she puts them in the bag, like praise them like you wouldn't believe. That's just a great thing to do. So just complimenting people and praising people, especially people that you assume don't need it. It's amazing how many leaders on a lot of money who are very strong, they really respond well to praise. So be an encourager or develop a culture of encouragement around you. Number 3, be empathetic. So that's not pathetic, that's empathetic. And it's interesting when you sit down like with a coaching client and just saying, what does empathy mean to you? And it's sort of an interesting question that you can do in teams. You can go through and say, what does this principle mean? How are we expressing that? How can we use that? Do we really understand? And it's fascinating when you get 5 different definitions. And you think, oh, I assumed everybody thought it was this, this, and this. So the great thing about developing communication skills and interpersonal skills, especially if you've got staff or people around you, it doesn't just pay off at work. It makes everything else better. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. Don't try winning an argument. This is the biggest speed hump in communication going fast. So there's another great little book that was $2.50, 32 pages, called Skill with People, probably written 50 years ago, and it takes 20 minutes to read. And this very interesting challenge that I give people or clients when I'm working with them is to treat this like going to the gym. Read it every day, once for 30 days. And if you can't do that, let's have a think about that. Because these skills take time to build. Think about the amount of effort and resources and time you've put into your skills for your job or your expertise in your area. So how much time have you developed in your soft skills? Are my communication skills up to speed? Is it possible for them to get better? Is it going to carry me through when business gets busier? It's really exciting because you can put this under the umbrella of raising your standards. And raising your standards is a very powerful idea because it brings it right back to us. I can raise my standards in any area of my life that I want at any time I want. So sometimes it's interesting to, when you go home, look in the mirror when you're in the bathroom, and just say, is this really the best you can do? It's a really interesting question. So you can take any part of your life, and communication's a good one because it just pays off everywhere. And finally, help others to think that your conclusion is their own. So for example, if I've got a client that comes to me, a coaching client, and the issue is I'd like to lose weight. So that's normally how they express it. It's normally a lot of other things around that. So think about it in your situation if you've got something that you want somebody to do. So I could say, right, here's the solution. The other thing I can do is say, look, do you mind if I make a suggestion? Let's make a list of 30 benefits to your health that involved here, but that don't involve losing weight. So what are 30 ways you can improve your health, and what are benefits from that don't involve losing weight? So I help them build a case so that they can then invest in that themselves. So if you've got someone that wants to learn something and it's very tempting just to say, here's the solution, it's really good just to explore it with them so that they own part of that. And once they own part of that process, they're then much more likely to invest in it. And with the argument side of things, arguments just stop flow of communication. So the thing I learned in the Skill with People book is they just said, never disagree. Never disagree. Just never disagree. It doesn't mean you have to agree, just don't disagree. So if somebody says to me, black is white, I go, okay, I'm happy, no problem. Like, has everybody worked out you can't win illogical arguments? So why try? Like, I'm 51, I'm not getting any younger here, let's go, Can we move on to the next thing? So if you feel yourself going into an argument and think, oh, this is just not going to work, it's better to stay momentum, stay future focused, and just keep it going. So the best way to win an argument is just to avoid it. And it doesn't have to mean you agree, it just means don't disagree. So if someone said to me something that was, didn't fit, I'd just go, oh, that's definitely one way of looking at it. Oh, that's an interesting observation. I'm not saying you're right, but how many of you like being told you're wrong? And that's the thing. For us to be right, it means someone has to be wrong, and that's a speed hump in communication. So people don't like being wrong. So you just kind of have to be the bigger person and say, I can give up my need to be right here and just keep progressing and moving forward. Okay, so we're going to talk about this wonderful role that some German companies have, and it's the Director of Fundamental Questions. And so the role of the Director of Fundamental Questions is, what are the next fundamental questions I need to be asking as my business grows and moves forward? Because the businesses you have at the moment are reflective of the questions you've been asking yourself. So if you want to grow your business, expand your business, give your business more foresight, see what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years, it's really helpful just to say, I probably need to ask some different questions. So what's the next first step that we can take to make this situation different? That's always a great question when you're going around in a loop. How can we transform this? So questions that lead not into getting mired down in a problem, but actually, okay, let's move this on. What's the first step that we can do to change the situation? We may not be changing the whole situation, but once you get on a roll, you'll be amazed at what comes together. So giving yourself a title of the Director of Fundamental Questions is a lot of fun because you think, there's much better questions. There's always better questions you can ask. Questions are the answers all the time. So it's a very powerful thing. And if it's top of mind, then you do it. So questions. And that's something you can do in a meeting with people. When I meet successful people, I love asking them, what's the best question you've asked this year? What's the best question you've asked this year? What's the best question someone's asked you? What have you read this year? Like, I'm really interested in finding out because that says a lot about people, what they're reading, what they're asking. So a paradigm shift occurs when a question is asked inside the current paradigm that can only be answered outside of it. That's deeper than it looks. You might want to, that's where the solutions are. The solutions are outside your current paradigms. And that's why it's good sometimes to get left field people coming in or people that you maybe your receptionist doesn't sit in director meetings, but sometimes bring them in because they ask really amazing questions. They'll ask a question, you'll go, what an excellent thought. So be innovative around how you can get better questions coming through from your business. So as we go hurtling into this new era of technology, it can feel a bit weird. It can just feel a bit strange because change is going to be fast. Not everybody loves change. Change can be really super exciting, and it can also be a little scary. But the main thing is, if you work together as a team, it just works a lot better and embrace it. And you're awesome for being here. Thanks.